the arcades. Before video gaming was dominated by home consoles, kids would go batshit excited to go to the local arcade centres to have one hell of a good time playing little fun arcade games. Now, even though I wasn't born around the era of arcade gaming, that doesn't mean I didn't get the chance to experience the fun that arcades had that gave me great memories. Well, mainly at the Star Hotels on holiday. So, because of this, I have been inspired to make a top 10 list of my personal favourite arcade games. So without further ado, let's start off with number 10, Rampage. Now, I do remember playing this game a hell of a long time ago when I was about 5 years old going on holiday, and I was hooked up with it for one reason. It was the first game I played where the environments were destructible. You take control of 3 monsters, a gorilla, a dinosaur and a werewolf, and your goal is to destroy as many buildings as you can to proceed to the next level, whilst trying to take down people, the police and helicopters. You can take damage from the helicopters and other sworn enemies, but can regain health by eating other stuff like roast chicken, fruit and all sorts. Back then this was quite the addicting game for me. As of now, yeah, it's sort of aged too quickly because of today's generation, which is why it's only number 10 on this list, but I had to put it on because it was the game that made a huge impact on me to experience more arcade games to come, and it was one of the most destructive games I played back in my childhood. Coming at number 9, Crazy Taxi! Oh yeah, back when Sega knew what else to make besides Sonic the Hedgehog, Crazy Taxi is without a doubt one of the most fast-paced arcade games out there. And let me tell you, this game gave me a lot of nostalgic memories back in holidays and vacations. In this game, you can choose through a lot of badass looking characters, take a taxi and just ride off through the streets and take people to their destinations before the timer expires. Back then in 1999, this was highly creative as well as it was addicting. Also, just the environment, feel and music of the game really kicks off the nostalgia beam for me. I have played one of the home console versions of Crazy Taxi as well, but to be honest, it just didn't have that same wild feel that the arcade version had. So naturally, I do prefer playing this game when it was on the arcade at the time. But even so, Crazy Taxi was still, and probably is, a still highly fun and memorable arcade experience. Coming at number 8, Pac-Man. Yet it would be a crime not to add one of the most memorable arcade games on this list, and also the game that introduced the first ever video game mascot. Though why is it only at number 8? Well, the fact that it has been surpassed by many other games to come, especially other arcade games that came at the time. But Pac-Man still remains as one of the greatest classics in the timeline of video games. The gameplay itself was just as addicting when you play it in the arcades. Just collect as many dots as you can, avoid the ghosts that do not get hit, and remain alive at all costs. There really isn't much to say about this treasure without repeating myself. Pretty much any gamer who has played a lot of 1980s classics in their day should have played Pac-Man from the very beginning. I guess my only problem with the game is that it has way too many levels. The game consists of over 250 levels! Seriously, could you imagine going through all this 250 times? Well, it will be the complete opposite when we get to... Coming at number 7, Donkey Kong. Just like Pac-Man, how could I possibly exclude one of the greatest arcade classics? Donkey Kong was the first ever game to make the debut of both Donkey Kong and Mario, who was originally called Jumpman in this game. This game is also one of the most earlier 2D platformers. All you had to do in this game was take control of Mario, jump from platform to platform whilst avoiding Donkey Kong's obstacles, reach the girl and proceed to the next level where more obstacles are introduced. And thankfully, unlike Pac-Man, this game has kept the level amount to an extent, even though there's only about 4 or 5 levels from what I can remember. Much like Pac-Man, there really isn't much to say about it, since every gamer should have at least heard or played Donkey Kong at one point in their lives. As for the sequels, Donkey Kong Jr. and Donkey Kong 3, well, Jr. was good, but 3 was kind of a letdown. But other than that, Donkey Kong is well deserving of its place in video game history, and also on this list. Coming at number 6, Joe and Mac, Caveman Ninja. Now, if I had to pick the most underrated arcade game on this list, this is definitely it. Joe and Mac, Caveman Ninja is probably one of the more creative and original arcade games. You take control as two different types of cavemen, and your mission is to battle through all kinds of prehistoric levels and then save a cave girl at the end of the stage. The game has a ton of variety, more than the previous arcade games on this list, mainly with its wacky weapons, fun to kill enemies, intense levels, and especially its platforming. One thing that made this game more difficult is that your health bar decreases over a period of time due to hunger, and this means that you have to make sure you eat a good amount of food, otherwise you'll die of starvation. The game also has a good cartoon humour and comedy in it, very much like how Rayman did. I would recommend playing this game on the Sega Mega Drive port if you didn't get the chance to experience it in the arcade, because it is a very overlooked game that people should still give a fair chance to. Joe and Mac Caveman Ninja deserves its number 6 spot, and I haven't played the sequel yet, but I still recommend a lot of people to try Joe and Mac. Coming at number 5, Street Fighter 2. Now the only reason why I added the second Street Fighter game on this list is because I never got the chance to play the rest of the other Street Fighter games, even though I have briefly played Street Fighter 4. In fact, I would have added Street Fighter 4 on this list if I had originally played it in its arcade form. So this spot goes to the second Street Fighter game, and it is well deserving of it. I think this is because Street Fighter 2, personally to me, has the most memorable characters, levels and music. It is a simplistic Street Fighter game, yes, but it really knows how to pack the action, and the atmosphere is really nostalgic for me. Back then when I played this on vacation, I always used to play as characters like Ryu and Blanka, which was probably because that the arcade version I played only had a few amount of characters to play as, but because of that it was the most addicting arcade for me to play it on vacation. And you know what? I don't think I can fault it for anything else, but I hope one day to experience this game in its arcade form again, if I ever get the chance to find another arcade centre nowadays. Coming at number 4, Tekken 3. Much like Street Fighter, I haven't played a lot of the Tekken games in their original arcade forms with the exception of Tekken 3. And man, is it good or what? This may sound weird, but in my opinion Tekken 3 is a lot more creative and hardcore than Street Fighter 2. The characters in Tekken 3 have a lot more moves and characteristics to them, which for me makes them more fun to play as. Much like Street Fighter 2, the game's soundtrack and level atmosphere has given me fond memories of playing it on vacation, which really makes me sad that I'll never be able to go back to these days again. But still, Tekken 3 just has a lot of fun combat that I heavily enjoyed when I first practiced the moves for most of the characters, even though it was quite hard to get used to when I was playing it on the arcade. I guess my main complaint with the game though is that the combat can be a bit slow paced at times, but overall it's still a really atmospheric fighting game that brought a lot of nostalgic memories for me that I will never forget. Coming at number 3, The Simpsons arcade game. Now back then when I was about 7 years old, I used to be quite the fan of The Simpsons, even though now I find that the series has gone really stale lately. But the most memorable experience of The Simpsons for me was the arcade game. The game is basically an action beat 'em up game where you can take control of any of the main Simpsons characters and go through a lot of intense action-packed levels of the Simpsons universe. Despite having the one-player option, the game is a lot more fun to play with 4 players because it gives more of an action-packed experience. Despite bringing a lot of this into the realm of The Simpsons, the game still has a lot of gags and funny moments that the Simpsons cartoon had. This game also has been voted as the #1 best game based on a cartoon. I'm not sure if I particularly agree with that, but I can understand why, since this game is wild, addicting and heavily enjoyable. That makes it a great fan service for fans of The Simpsons as well as arcade lovers, so I still highly recommend you to experience this one. Just like... Coming at number 2, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the arcade game. One thing I have to say, shell shock! I mean, man, even back when I was a kid, I was never a fan of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, and I still got glued to this game on vacation. Just like the Simpsons arcade game, you can take control of one of the main Ninja Turtles and battle it out through all different kinds of levels from the Ninja Turtle universe, and also play up to 4 players to make the fun factor all the more better. What put this game higher than The Simpsons, however, is that the 4-player feature and even the single-player feature is a lot more action-packed and hardcore, with the combat moves, the toughest shit enemies, the challenging levels, and even the hardcore boss fights. I'm sure anyone who's played this game on the arcade, no matter what time period it was, it has given them the best memories of action beat 'em up arcade games, because it sure as hell did for me. Even if you're not even interested in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles TV show, that still doesn't mean that you should overlook this fantastic arcade classic. So go find the arcade centres now and play it while you still can! And my number one most favourite arcade game is Time Crisis 2. Now this may seem like an odd choice for a number one spot, but I'll explain. Out of all arcade games that involved first person shooting, Time Crisis 2 is without a doubt my most enjoyed out of all of them, and it's the arcade game that I played the most out of back then. There is so much action, intense moments, well balanced challenge when fighting the enemies, and most of all, the atmosphere really felt like you were in an intense action movie. What also made this game unique is that you can use G-Con arcade guns to play the game in its way, along with a secondary player to make the fun factor really out there. I'm dead serious when I say that Time Crisis 2 is probably the most fun I ever got out of my experiences with the arcades, or hell, even out of a first-person shooter game. And I know a lot of people might disagree with me on that, but that's understandable. I know there is a PS2 port of the game, and as much as I love the game, I'd rather not try it out and stick with playing it at the arcade. And I encourage all of you to do the same thing if you haven't played this game yet, even if you're not too big on first-person shooters, because it is a well-balanced, challenging and hardcore shooter game on the arcade, and it's the reason why it's number one on this list. Well, that was my top 10 favourite arcade games, people. This is Zookstar 1000, and I will see you all in the next video.